Hi guys, guess what time it is? If you have guessed 1:22 a.m., then you would be correct. Here I am. Again, I do not have a normal sleep schedule. I'm trying my best. Anyways, welcome back. I am a bit inactive because of my exams, but I am striving to juggle exam season and making videos. And every single time I see someone say a comment about me using ChatGPT, I'm just like, I would be posting every single day if I was using AI. No, I go through my sources, I read my sources, I compile my notes, I write my whole script. Like that's what takes the longest. It's usually like reading through sources that takes a long time. Writing I can do it, I can knock it down in like 1 to 2 hours, but reading that takes me a while. Anyways, in today's video, we're going to be in today's video, we're going to be rewriting history, reshaping history, and moving away from patriarchal bias. In general, I definitely think that women's contributions are always overlooked socially, whether it be the physical labor of women in the global south that keep the supply chains running, or the emotional labor that women contribute to dynamics and relationships, or the community building that women hold together with their bare hands. In the system of patriarchy, the father of capitalism, such contributions are seen as less valuable because no monetary value can be given to them. An example of this is how housewives are unpaid even though what they are doing is work. I have a lot of things to say on the value of labor in general under capitalism, but that's a whole other video on its own. But in today's video, we're going to be focusing on freedom efforts. Women's contribution to the struggles is often overlooked because women cannot enact as much physical force as the men, yet will suffer the most during war. And I legit will not discuss this with anyone. There is only one truth, especially with what happened during the recent protests in Kenya. Women faced grave accounts of sexual abuse, including rape, and people still want to discuss. Like, are you crazy? Clearly, if misogyny wasn't so deeply ingrained in Kenya, there wouldn't have been such cases. It literally seems like when it comes to women, empathy just stops existing in that.
The garden party at Government House was an informal farewell to British rule in Kenya. Jomo Kenyatta presented some of the guests to the Duke and Mr. Sands. An epoch of 68 years was closing, years in which a wilderness became a thriving country. At Nairobi, the Duke of Edinburgh and Mr. Kenyatta received the freedom of the city.
Chapter 1, the fight for independence. So first, we're going to have a bit of a history lesson. Ideally, if you're a Kenyan, you should know this, and if you don't, then I am very concerned about the education, but I am going to keep it brief. The Mau Mau emerged around 1952 and lasted around till around 1960, and were, in my opinion, the catalyst to Kenya's independence. They were a guerrilla army / militia that were focused on freeing Kenya from the British. During this time, because of the Mau Mau and other freedom movements, the British declared a state of emergency. A state of emergency is basically when a government passes policies that they wouldn't normally be allowed to for the protection of its citizens. Hitler did something similar in 1933 after the Reichstag fire. It's basically code for we get to do whatever, in my opinion. Important context that I think is very crucial to understand about the Mau Mau. It was first of all not only constituting it was first of all not only constituting it was first of all not only constituting of Kikuyus, there were Embus, Merus, Masais, and Kambas as well. The only reason it was majority Kikuyu was because Nairobi, where majority of the settlers lived, is close to Central. It's all about proximity. That's why even the other tribes mentioned are the ones found around that region. There was even detention camps in Kajiado because it's close to Nairobi. The Mau Mau rebellion was not about Kikuyu nationalism. It was about freedom, and everyone was in on it. And adding onto that, there were and had been several freedom struggles across the country. Nandi resistance, Giriama rebellion, Chetambe War of 1985. And also, I want to call back at this point to the Maji Maji rebellion in Tanzania against the Germans. This was a very prolific resistance movement in East Africa, and it inspired a lot of Africans to revolt. So all this talk of we are not our ancestors, we are not our grandparents. Yeah, clearly we aren't, because they were part of lethal militias and we post infographics. Okay? So, during the state of emergency between 1954 and 1960, around 1.2 million Kenyans were forced into colonial villages. So here back home, the British are sending, and across the world, they're sending circulated images of the colonial villages, and these images depicted community, safety, and even joy. And then we had the Home Guard, which was a reaction to the Mau Mau. This was a paramilitary army which consisted of Kenyans, sadly, kind of like the goons we have during our protests, but they outnumbered the Mau Mau. Okay, so you understand, there's the Mau Mau, we have the British, and then we have the Home Guard. Chapter 2, Women in the Fight for Independence. So firstly, we need to understand how women were viewed, as Marine E. Santoro researches in The Colonial Idea of Women and Direct Intervention, the Mau Mau, which will be the first source we look into. A lot of what's officially on paper is from the colonizers, and that has influenced how we view women's roles in the fight for independence, but also showed how much there's no value for things that don't necessarily align with the patriarchal ideals of violence, as I explained earlier, with the men being the ones who can enact violence in a severe way. So for this chapter, I will be looking into two sources, and I've already introduced the first one. The thing to note about this paper is that it says that the Mau Mau was the strongest expression of Kikuyu nationalism, which I just fundamentally disagree with. It was about freedom. The definition of nationalism is identification with one's own nation and support for its identification with one's own nation and support for Yay! Identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. And that is just not what was happening at all. It was oppressed fighting against oppressors, and they just wanted to be free of that. And as I had said before, a lot of tribes were involved all over the country. And not only that, like, they would never say we want to be, like, in most of the anecdotal interviews that we have, they would talk about white people leaving and Africans staying. It was never about Kikuyus. Everyone just wanted to be free. And so I have to say that when we look at that paper. Anyways, from this paper, we see that the British believed that women were part of the passive wing of the freedom movement. They believed that the uprising was orchestrated by a few that would corrupt the others and force women and children to take the Mau Mau oath. But the truth is that women were also on the battlefield. Those that were not on the battlefield, those that weren't on the battlefield, of course, would give food to the warriors, be spies and the ears on the ground for the Mau Mau. But women did go into combat. Women were also sent into detention for Mau Mau related crimes. But in general, it's kind of crazy to see how literally giving fuel and providing protection was seen as passive, and that they couldn't even believe that women also wanted to be free or that they would join the Mau Mau on their own. According to the Ministry of Community Development, 843 detainees and 862 convicted female supporters of Mau Mau were being held at committee in December 1954. Then there were, my wrist is hurting. Then there were rehabilitation centers that cemented gender roles, cementing nuclear family and passing on European values to create an entirely new social order. Yay, the systematic rooting of misogynoir. I loved it. I love it. So the next paper we look into is The Mau Mau Rebellion, Kikuyu Women and Social Change by Cora Ann Presley. This was very much a recording of oral histories and anecdotes by Mau Mau women and what role they played. A total of 34,147 women were sentenced to jail for violations of the emergency regulations between 1952 and 1958. They literally had to expand committee because there were so many women that were involved. It was somehow even seen as safer to be a female Mau Mau supporter if you were married to a man involved in politics. Then you can be at home and support them on behalf of your family. Please read the paper because there were also very many dynamics, or like an interesting dynamics going on between Kenyan men and Kenyan women at the time. The men apparently didn't want the women joining the Mumbi Central Association because because the men didn't invite them to join, they started the Kikuyu Central Association, both with the aim of preserving culture. And this is the context for one of the interviews that I'm about to read out. Only children did not take the oath. I won't talk about that. I want to tell how Mbiu helped to build the dormitories so that you can understand the role women played when Mzee Kenyatta came from Europe. We met with him. We had not completed the dormitories. We had no windows. He helped us. He was on our side. From that time on, he was on our side. If there were no women, then the war would not have carried on. And the women were mostly girls, because if the men were beaten, they would tell the secrets and the girls would not. Even Mzee knew that the girls played a great part, and that is why he gave us Madaraka. I know there's conflicting opinions on Jomo Kenyatta, but I do think that he did what needed to be done. He did the best with what he had. During this time, there was also a boycott that women did against working on coffee estates, and the British still thought that it was planned by the men. Another disclaimer in this paper, it says women's participation in public arena politics was indeed alien to Kikuyu custom. Colonialism changed women's political roles. This change did not originate in the decade before the state of emergency was declared, but predated Mau Mau by 20 years. Small groups of women became nationalists in 1930s. Over the next 20 years, they recruited thousands of other women to be nationalists. Okay, whatever. I think that is very ingenuine framing. Africa was Africa was patriarchal. Europeans made it worse with capitalism and misogyny. So yeah, you guys changed the rules, but there are very many accounts of women in tribal, socio-political circles and making decisions in the tribe. So this is just a very different system that prioritized men over women. And that's why women were not allowed in politics, because the British literally did not prioritize the education of women. And secondly, the paper keeps stating this as politics, or that women wanted political involvement. But I feel like that doesn't fully encapsulate that it was applied for freedom. Of course, everything we do is political, but this was about life itself. And I feel like that's more that's a notch higher, than politics. In my notes, I also have written down the significance of ancestral land is lost on the European. Because, I'm also going to read some names now. Some of the women that were interviewed in this paper, we have Modoni Wagashie, Wangoi Wagikoyo, Rebecca Njeri, who was detained together with Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, Priscilla Wambaki, who was a member of KAU, and we have other women in general across the country that also were freedom fighters. We have Cherume from Embu, Chiokairaine from Meru, and Wamoyo Gakoro. Chapter 3, Chapter 3, examples of Kenyan female freedom fighters. In this chapter, I'm going to briefly touch on 3 women that were prolific in fighting for our freedom. I don't understand why I have been trying to have a good posture when I could just slouch. I'm gonna be presenting these 3 women briefly because there isn't a lot on them, and I would need a professional editor if I was gonna do a deep dive. Okay, so firstly, we are going to talk about Field Marshal Muthoni Kirima. Muthoni was born in Central Province in 1931. She became a spy for the Mau Mau when she was 20 years old. That's like my age, me spying. When she was 20 years old, together with her husband, me married. Let me stop. People were moving quickly back then. People were moving quickly. When she was 20 years old, together with her husband, who is known to me as Mr. Muthoni Kirima, for Muthoni, delivering food and spying was not enough. She felt called to the battlefield, as people sometimes are. She convinced Dedan Kimathi to let her fight, and because she was a really good soldier, she was given the rank of Field Marshal and was the only woman ever to reach this rank. Mind you, there are only 4 marshals in the whole of Mau Mau, and our girl was one of them.
Exactly.
I look so good right now, guys. Sorry. I literally look incredible. I put on my ring light. I was just like, whoa. Who is this girl? Period. Oh, let me stop. Her sister Mokami was also a Mau Mau fighter. In the forest, Modoni led the hunt for elephants, walked hundreds of kilometers to pick up weapons from Ethiopia, and only came out of the forest. And only came out of the forest after independence, trapping animals to cook while she was in the forest. When it was over, she was poorer than she had done when she had joined the rebellion. She approached Mzee Kenyatta and convinced him to grant her a license to trade in ivory. Okay, Loki was being selfish because he could have given her a lot more than a license. Her permission to collect and sell wild ivory ended in 1976 when trade in ivory was banned. She wore her locks until 2022 when she asked She wore her locks until 2022 when she asked Ngina Kenyatta to shave it as a symbol to show that Kenya was free. She died 4th of September 2023. May she rest in peace and power. Gyaldem number 2 is the legend, the myth, Mekatilili wa Menza, our Giriama queen. Mekatilili wa Menza was born in the Mutara Watsatsu Ganze village, Kilifi County, in the 1840s. I'm going to link the source down below because there was a lot of different events with the Giriama struggle against British colonialism and slave trade. Because yes, slave trade also transpired in Eastern Africa. She became involved as a leader of the resistance around 1912 to 1915. Also, I couldn't find an official source, but I know that it is said that she had a vision warning about the coming of white-skinned people who are going to destroy their peace. She is known as a prophetess, and I've had this my whole life. So I know that this exists as a thing that, Mekatilili Wamenza did. August 13th, 1913, the Giriama people held one of their most famous acts of rebellion. During a meeting with Arthur Champion, the colonizer who was trying to diminish local resistance and recruit youth to fight in World War I, the Giriama leaders walked into the venue with a chicken and checks. They challenged Champion to get a check from its mother's hen, but it pecked at his hand. The leaders then said the same would happen if he tried to take their children from their people to the war. I literally wrote this. I don't know why I'm laughing. Anyways, if you guys didn't know, there were Kenyans who served in World War One. In response to the rebellious action of the Giriama people, members of the IBEA delegation opened fire, killing people indiscriminately and destroying houses in the community. Mekatilili and another leader were sent to Kisii, where they were held in prison. After 6 months in prison on January 14th, 1914, Mekatilili and Wanje walked free and trekked more than 700 kilometers back to Kilifi. Kisii to Kilifi. On the coast of Kenya. Bro, imagine how much talking they did. What? Whoa. Mekatilili was arrested again on August 16th, 1914. This time she was sent to Kismayo in Somalia. In 1919, Mekatilili was released from prison, was able to return and taking on a role of leadership in the Women's Council. Mekatilili Wamenza died in 1924 and was buried in the Dakacha woodland. Every year, a festival named after her pays her tribute. May she rest in power and peace.
I was arrested on 14th March 1922. I was taken to police line, Government Road. And after that, the Africans start assembling there, asking for my release.
No Africans in Nairobi were working those 2 days. We had pickets out to make sure people did not break the strike. Mary Wanjiru leapt to her feet, pulled her dress right up over her shoulders, and shouted to the men, "You take my dress and give me your trousers. You men are cowards. What are you waiting for? Our leader is in there. Let's get him."
Now, this is one of my favorite people in history ever. I am always thinking about her. She's always on my mind. This incident is always in my mind every single day. Her name is Mary Wanjiru. Not a lot of stuff is known about her, but as you saw in that clip, she was the catalyst for the protest against Harry Toko's arrest. So this was an incident that happened. Well, she was the catalyst for like probably the biggest retaliation to Harry Toko's arrest. When Harry Toko was arrested, the East African Association striked, and this was like the East African Association striked and marched to the police station, Nairobi police station. Then I guess they went home and the women took an oath for a specific plan, which apparently is like taboo for women to like do something like that. Like apparently taking an oath is like really bad. Anyways, 16th of March, 6 men were chosen to go talk to some white guys about Tuku's release. And then they were told he will go through trial and they will decide the fate. Wende home. Because they were striking every day. And these women had that and they were just like, where are we going? Why are we bonking? We are not bonking.
To bonga, bonga, no. What are we bonging with you? What are we bonging with you? No, we cannot bong with you. You can go and bong.
Then they were pushing forward, claiming bribery and that these men are cowards. So then the men that had started leaving came back because, men hate to be emasculated. And then Wanjiru ran to the front of the crowd and lifted her dress up and basically emasculated the men, a tactic known as Gutora Miranganya. Y'all tell me if I ate up that Kikuyu. You tell me. Which apparently is like really bad because men aren't supposed to see mothers naked. But I genuinely think that was post-colonial because low-key everyone was naked all the time before colonialism. So, but yeah, women started ululating and the crowd moved forward until the Askaris opened fire and she was one of the first people to die. May she rest in power and peace. Favorite girl. So my conclusion, I think that women's contribution to the world are always kind of made to seem as not worthy. And I just want to highlight the Parliament Day would not have happened if baddies didn't convince everyone else to go to the street. I think it's to the point where women have also internalized this framing. Bethany Rabish writes in Kenya's female freedom fighters were the silent heroes of the anti-colonial movement. Here are some of their stories. During this research, I often received a similar response from women. You want to speak to my husband? He was in the forest. He was detained. He was one of those heroes. While actually women were always being watched by the British because they were what was sustaining the movement. They had to act accordingly, not to mention that women would be harassed and raped by fake Mau Mau known as Komerera, who merely just existed to harass women when they would go give food in the forest. Home guard would also harass them if they were caught going to give the Mau Mau food. And sometimes even by the real Mau Mau when their loyalty was doubted. Mostly women go through the worst forms of violence during like everything, just like every single day. That's like a possibility for women. Like that's just a fear that we all just have to deal with. I think ultimately what makes me mad is that it seems like it's such a slow change. The liberation of women is taking the longest time. Freedom from patriarchy is just, we're just dragging it. I'm upset that we give so much of ourselves, yet we still live in patriarchy. I'm upset that the world benefits off of feminism and we still live in fear. And then Kenyan patriarchy is just an insane world on its own. Hey. Thanks for sticking with me on this video. Thank you if you've reached here. Celebrate women today and forevermore. Hello. And I will see you next week. Hopefully. Bye-bye and thank you.